G'day. Today we're going to talk about grappling and whether you need to do it or not. And some of the motivation for this has come about by some prominent YouTube creators saying that you're not a complete martial artist unless you have done some grappling. And I don't agree. I think that's a flawed statement. And there's a few reasons why, but to give you a background about where I come from in the debate is that I come from a Kung Fu background, and I can see the eyes rolling already, but my Sifu came up with a system that didn't involve grappling, but we dealt with the idea of someone trying to grapple or trying to take us to the ground. We don't want to go to the ground. More specifically, we deal with multiple opponent encounters, and so the idea of going to the ground is the worst thing. And so again, you're thinking, well, how do we deal with grappling? Well, just because someone's trying to take us to the ground doesn't mean we're going to let them. And there's a few things that we can do to give ourselves a better chance. And that statement in and of itself is pivotal to this whole discussion, to give yourself a better chance. So if we're thinking about our success in terms of what we want to achieve with our martial art, firstly we've got to understand what world we're thinking of. If it's the competitive world where I'm entering martial arts to compete against others, to win tournaments, and something, obviously UFC is the most obvious example of that. Needing to grapple is understandable. So yes, in that framework, needing to grapple is an essential. Okay, but where I come from, which is how do I keep myself safe, survival-based understanding of martial arts. It's an odds game. All I'm doing is trying to improve my odds of surviving an encounter. And the idea that I have to engage in grappling because the age-old statement that always comes out is the majority of fights that go to ground, so therefore you need to grapple. I don't subscribe to that. Not that I don't believe that fights go to ground, but you need to flip it and say, well, I'm going to train it so I don't go to the ground. And it's not that we're thinking that that's never going to be an eventuality. It's that we're trying to improve our odds in such a way that we don't go to ground. And for me, the idea of training a striking art, be it Kung Fu or Karate, and then thinking, oh, but what if it goes to ground, I need to do my grappling. You're under no, you're not aware of how much your opponent or opponents have trained in the grappling arts over the years, such that if you do go to ground, you're as good as dead anyway. So don't go to ground. For me, there's a far more exciting problem to solve, and that is the information that lies within my style. How can I apply that in such a way that I'm more likely to solve a situation by applying it correctly than trying to add on another system to my style because I fear that my style's not enough. And I feel like if you're a genuine martial artist that's trying to solve a problem of your own safety and your self-defense, to appropriate a whole nother system into your style isn't necessarily being true to that idea of being a martial artist. So for me, it's more invigorating and more exciting to try and find those solutions within your style. And For us, there's a few ideas that we engage with that we'd like to think that improve our chances of survival, even if someone is trying to take us to the ground. Things like continuing to move, accelerating into our opponent, non-grab theory, all sorts of ideas that can help us survive a situation, but don't involve us actually grappling. They help us deal with someone trying to grapple, but we don't actually grapple. And it's important that for those of you who might be considering about whether or not you need to grapple so you can be safer, is that you need to consider the consequences of going to ground, and whether that's something that you see as being a legitimate way of solving the problem of your safety in dealing with not only one opponent, but multiple opponents. And that's vital. So we don't advocate grappling as a means of keeping yourself safe. And I actually think it's actually, as I said in the beginning, it's flawed to suggest that you need grappling to keep yourself safe, because the other thing that you need to consider is that how do you know how well trained your opponent's going to be? You might do some grappling, but they might have done 20 years of grappling and you're never going to overcome that. The other aspect that we find fundamental to what we're trying to do is one of the issues in dealing with grappling is a submission art. So to be successful means you're submitting your opponent, which means you're dominating and controlling. Now for some people that's just never going to be the case. Be it they're not skilled enough, be it the physical disadvantages that they might encounter. So we take the view that your safety is not about controlling or dominating your opponent. It's merely about dealing with your opponent. And that could be as simple as running away. It could be as simply as moving through them in a way that they don't expect and getting to the exit and getting somewhere safe. But it's certainly not an issue of trying to dominate and submit them. And certainly when there's a significant size difference, we all know that that becomes that much more difficult. And a skill difference as well. So we need to change the conversation away from survival meaning winning, because it doesn't. Survival means survival, and the problem is when we start having these combat martial arts trying to impose what they see as success in their world on the world of self-defense and survival, because with it comes a lot of issues in terms of they're not the same outcome that we're wanting. Which, if the outcomes are different, it means the process is going to be different, it means the approach is going to be different. So all these things have to be taken into account in such a way that if I'm trying to survive a situation, I'm not necessarily trying to dominate, I'm not necessarily trying to control. So grappling is not going to be part of that equation for us. There's a few other videos that I have put up already that sort of demonstrate some of the technical aspects about how I engage an opponent, etc., which might help illuminate what I'm talking about. But in general, the idea of domination and control is not what we're about, and as a result, grappling is not what we're about. Notwithstanding significant other issues that we have with grappling, which is its static nature in terms of it being rooted in one spot, and not the idea of trying to get to an exit, etc., etc. I hope this stimulates some conversation and debate. If you've got any comments, let me know, and I'm only too happy to reply. There'll be other videos coming up along this topic as well. Okay, thanks. Bye.